Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Pie Show. This is episode 10. This episode is about death, religion, and the afterlife. And we talked a little bit about life and death in episode 2, Infinite Timelines. And we're going to talk more in depth about death and what I believe happens when we die. And so we're going to be doing like we normally do, put the episode into 3 parts, each given its own part, and a final part about the afterlife. And we'll be talking about some stuff that I wanted to talk about in episode 2 that I didn't get the chance to talk about. And I think it'll tie in well with, the afterlife anyway. And I wore this shirt because look, man, it's the Grim Reaper. A lot of people think death is kind of a pretty scary thing, which is understandable because life is a pretty beautiful and precious thing, but the Grim Reaper is not a bad guy. Alright, so, talking about death. Death is something that a lot of people find very scary or very sad. I feel that it really can be that way, but I think there's also a realm of wonder that comes with death. For me, I've known people who are very young and very old who have died. Death comes for all of us, sort of like the ultimate equalizer. I don't know if it's really necessary for me to define death, because I feel like most people who know how it is to be alive understand what it is to die. But if I were to define death, I would say that, and I talked about this a little bit in episode 2, but for me, the way I see death is, there's 2 main things in our physical universe. That's matter and energy. And life requires both of those things working together. Giving us a physical body and energy that is internal. And so our physical body is made of matter, and our energy, like our heart pumping blood and the electricity that goes through our neural synapses, that's all energy. And so when we die, the energy that is within our bodies leaves. The reason I feel so certain I can say that is because of the law of conservation of energy and the law of conservation of matter. These laws state that matter cannot be created nor destroyed, as well as the same goes for energy, cannot be created nor destroyed. So when we die, that energy leaves and it goes somewhere. We're going to talk more about that a little later, but I want to focus more on death right now and how it is sort of like that leaving the empty shell, like we're hermit crabs, and once we're dead, we leave that shell and we go and we do something else. One of my first interactions with death was when I first moved out and was living on my own. I was living in this house, this little apartment, and I would look out my window, my bedroom window, and just look at the backyard sometimes. And this one time I looked out and there was a bird that died, and I think it just flew into a window or something. Since it happens, birds can see their reflection in the window as they fly, and I don't know, it's like just get mesmerized or something. They fly into it and they die. And so this happened to this bird, and it was just laying on the ground, and I wasn't that sad when I saw it, but then another bird came and was on the roof and was looking down at the other dead bird, and I couldn't help but wonder if this bird on the roof had a concept of death, like an understanding of the fact that its other bird friend of his was dead. And that's what made me really sad, was to think of what it must be like to learn of death for the first time for an animal. Things like funerals, interesting, and mourning is a huge part of death. I remember learning recently that mourning is a big part of how we show love to those that we cared about that have died. If you don't mourn someone who died, it's almost like you don't really, I don't know, you're not very close to that person maybe. For me that was hard for when my grandfathers died. So I kind of felt weird because I don't feel like I mourned a lot, but I don't think I was very, very close to my grandparents, just because I didn't see them very often. But I know that I really do love my grandparents, but I didn't really mourn a lot. But it is sad to think that I will never speak with my grandfathers again. At least, not until I'm dead. When I was talking about the wonder, the wonder of death, I think the big part of wonder that comes with death is, what happens after we die, and that's something that a lot of people wonder about. How death is usually thought to be very painful. Right, one of the most painful things in life is death, the final part of life. And I think that a big part of why this is so reasonable is because, this is like, when we die, it's like the last pain we ever feel. And so it makes sense that it would be the most pain that we ever feel. And, but honestly, I think that really varies with how we die, because there's so many ways a person can die, or an animal. And this is because we require so much to live. Life can be so complicated because it requires so many things, and what makes death kind of simple is because you really just restrict one of those things, and then that's it. You die, or whomever dies. So I would say that when it comes to death, it's understandable that instinctively one would be afraid of it because instinctively we want to live, and we are animals that seek to survive, and so it's understandable that one would be afraid of death. But I would say don't be too afraid of death, mainly because it's inevitable, but also because like I was saying with the energy that moves on, you are that energy that comes out of you when you die, and so it'll be okay. It's not really the end. It's the end of like what you're used to, the life that you had, but it's not the end as in the ultimate end for you. And that's why it's not too bad. But we'll get into more about religion in a little while. Religion has to do with beliefs, faith, and for the most part a moral compass. Religion it can be all sorts of things. A belief in God, a belief in multiple gods, no belief in God, potentially confusion as to whether or not there is a God, and there's even a religion about alien souls that have come down and now inhabit our planet. And I wanted to point out that in general, I think that just a belief in aliens could be considerably a religion. And I also want to point out that there's really, if you think about it, there's not a whole lot of difference between science and religion. I think for me, the biggest difference between those two things would be the fact that science doesn't have as strong of a moral compass. There may be somewhat of a moral compass within science, and I would think like a big example of that would be, for example, like stem cell research, how that was a pretty big scientific discovery for a while, but the reason that people stopped doing it is because it was considerably kind of wrong, because stem cells come from basically like an unborn fetus for the most part. There are stem cells in like everyone's brain and whatnot, but for the most part, to really have stem cells, to work with stem cells, it kind of means having to end someone's life. And so for that reason, it was considered wrong, and people stopped doing it. So there is a little bit of moral compass to science, in which case it kind of more closely connects science and religion. And you might think I'm crazy for saying that, but in reality, both science and religion, we kind of develop our minds. They both sort of slowly lead to the evolution of man and mankind. Whereas religion sort of develops the moral compass a little better, hopefully. So sometimes I've seen cases where religion will kind of do the opposite of that, where it'll, I don't know, people get so stuck in what they believe, and what they believe is not necessarily right. Both science and religion they concentrate on, discerning the difference between what is right and what is wrong. And they both want to lead to bettering, humanity. Another big difference between science and religion is that science is something that can be reproducible, and religion is not necessarily reproducible. For example, a miracle. A miracle isn't something that you can just recreate whenever you want, whereas science is dependent on that. For me, growing up, I wasn't very religious. I didn't really believe much in God or anything like that. But as I became older, I had a pretty big experience that told me I should go to church now. And, well, it's really affected my life positively, very much so indeed. And I kind of rely on it now. Going to church is something that it sort of renews my faith in humanity, like, all the time, in a big way. Before I was a member of the church, I really thought negative things about humanity. I thought it was pretty awful because of all the wars and all of the horrible things that have happened. I would focus on those things. And when I go to church and things like that, I see the good side of humanity. I see the people who care for each other, people who are there for each other, and it is just a very positive environment. And it reminds me that people are good. People are inherently, well, they want to be good. A lot of people do. Some people don't. Anyway, another interesting distinction I wanted to point out between science and religion is, for example, when I was talking about, the discerning the difference between what's right and wrong, I would say that, someone who believes in the flat earth, they're called flat earthers, people who believe that the earth is flat, right? They are to science what someone who worships Satan is to something like a Christian, right? They both believe in what is considerably the wrong thing. Just to point out sort of a connection between those two that is comprehensible. Now, when it comes to religion, there is one big character. So for the most part, in our contemporary world, there is a belief in Christianity, right? Christianity is a pretty big religion now all over the world. I don't know if it's like the majority of religious beliefs or what. I kind of get the impression that it is, or just a belief in Jesus Christ in general. And one big, way that I would prove that without having any data from online or whatever, would be that it is the year 2021, right? And that date itself is defined by Jesus Christ, because the year 2021, it is 2021 AD, which stands for after death, and that's after the death of Jesus Christ. And that date would be meaningless if there was never a Jesus Christ. And so in general, usually time is sort of seen as like a scientific thing. But if you believe that it is the year 2021 AD, then in general, you must believe in the life and death of Jesus Christ. In general, Jesus Christ is a really big character in religion, especially for me because I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so, in general, for Christians, they believe that Jesus Christ lived and then died and then was resurrected, meaning he came back to life after he had died. And in general, this is important for humanity. This is important for humans because it helps them with their fear of death. A lot of people who are worried about dying, it is comforting to them to think or to know that when they die, they'll come back. And for me personally, I never really considered that a lot before I joined the religion that I'm a part of now. I would think about what would happen after I would die, but I feel a lot more certain now, especially after having thought it through scientifically. It kind of helped me verify that when we die, we do come back. And what we do afterwards, to me, is still a complete mystery. I know, a lot of what my church believes. I know what I personally believe, and they don't necessarily mesh completely, but they're pretty close. I would say that, yeah, I'll get to that soon. We'll be talking about that in part 3. But I wanted to focus more on religion for now. And I believe that religion it can be a really good thing or it can be a really bad thing. And I think that has everything to do with faith. If a person is very faithful to what they believe, then it can be a very good thing. But I've seen examples of where it's a very bad thing as well. I've heard of people who believe in the evangelical church can believe that gayness is really wrong or something like that. And if someone harms someone based off of the fact that they think gayness is wrong, that can be really a horrible thing. For me, what I've learned from my church is that just love is extremely important. And it doesn't matter who you are or what you believe. Even if someone was, a satanist, someone who believes in Satan and wants to worship Satan, for me, I don't think any good would come from me harming that person just because they believe something different than I do. And same goes for people who are homosexual. I have nothing wrong with those people. I still want to love those people. I don't think that it's extremely wrong for someone to believe that. I don't even really believe that it's wrong. I just believe that in order for humanity to continue, not everybody could be gay, because then we wouldn't reproduce anymore. And I don't think that gayness is wrong. I want to love everyone. And that's really a big part of what I've learned from my religion. So religion can be good, but it can be really bad if it's brought to, if you believe in something and you follow it for the wrong reasons. But faith in general, if I were to define faith, it is just basically what you do with what you believe. And if you practice what you preach. We're back and we're talking about the afterlife. So for a minute, I'm just going to talk about sort of some of the stuff that I was talking about in episode 2, Infinite Timelines. We're going to talk about these timelines. So basically the way I would sort of show simply what a timeline is like is it would go from one side to the other. Alright, so on the left we have matter, the right we have energy. The universe, can start as either all matter and convert to all energy, or vice versa, like we were talking about episode 2. So let's just imagine this happens over and over again. And for the sake of simplicity, we're going to just assume it only goes one way or the other, and it doesn't go from one spot to the other or back, basically starting from energy, going and around, and then coming back to energy. That's probably a possibility. I could totally see that happening, but we're not going to think about that just for the sake of simplicity. Okay, so when we're alive, we are somewhere on one of these lines. Let's say we're right here. And we're just going with the flow because that's all we can really do. We're a part of the universe either way, whether alive or dead. But when we die, it's kind of hard to say where we are on these lines. It's hard to say what could be possible. So let's say we die and we're going to be more like that. We're just going to be like a not filled in circle. So when it comes to being alive, you really have to stay on this line and there's nothing you can do about it. But when you die, who knows, right? what I like to think is when we die, we kind of become energy, and the universe is made of both matter and energy, but with matter, matter has to stay kind of in one spot relative to other matter, right? So these are just masses. And the way we decide on where they're located is just based off of the other object. But with energy, it's different, because energy can be like kind of anywhere, and you can sort of use the matter to tell you where the energy is in some ways. But you know, like the way I think about it is kind of like a puzzle. So you got like your jigsaw puzzle pieces. You got your jigsaw puzzle pieces, which is your matter, and then you can have all sorts of other ones too, being the other matter. And to hold the physical universe together, you gotta have all the matter, but you also gotta have the energy, because the energy is kind of like the glue that holds the puzzle pieces together. And the glue is just kind of everywhere around the puzzle pieces. And with each puzzle piece, it's like, you know that this is this specific puzzle piece relative to that specific puzzle piece. But with energy, it's just all of the glue. And it's hard to differentiate between, you know, glue over here or glue over there. Either way, it's just glue, right? And that's kind of how energy is. It's just kind of everywhere in the universe. And differentiating between energy and the universe is just like, you know, how do you even do that? What's the difference really? And so basically what my point is energy, like matter, is in one location in the universe, whereas energy is everywhere. It is everywhere that the universe is. So there's another way to say that. Matter is in one location at a time, and energy is everywhere at one time. So basically, with energy, energy kind of relates to death and what death is like. And so when we die, we're like energy, and we're everywhere at one time. And so that's kind of how I think about the universe in itself, the physical universe, because when you think about the physical universe in its entirety, it's just everywhere at once. And you could think about its specific parts and stuff, but that doesn't really make a huge difference. But the cool thing about being the universe, each timeline here, it's all part of the universe. And so kind of just, even if you had infinite of these lines, you went down, you know, through the list just to look through each timeline, that's every single one of those timelines is still the universe, and the universe is just all of those timelines. And so to be like energy, you know, you could technically, like as a spirit, as someone who's dead, like who could say, why wouldn't you be able to go from one timeline to another as someone who's dead, as just like a spirit? Because, you know, you could be like in the same sense like the universe, whereas matter, you know, and living things, they can kind of go down the line one at a time, but they can't really just traverse these parallel timelines because they're a part of the universe more solidly, as opposed to being like energy, where it's more like a liquid. You know, you're still part of the universe, but in a different sense. And so that's kind of what I think about with death and what you're capable of doing while you're dead. Is kind of just looking through all of the time in the universe and kind of potentially moving to a different location in time or whatever. I also think that you could just look down a timeline if you wanted to and sort of say, you know, focus on a moment if you wanted to. And really, it's just a different experience being dead than it is being alive. And time doesn't really exist for the universe and dead people in anywhere near the same way it does when we are alive, because we're just kind of stuck in those moments when we're alive and when we're matter, and when we're dead, we're not stuck anymore. We can do whatever. Alright guys, so as for the afterlife, there are kind of like 5 possibilities I wanted to talk about with the afterlife that are just kind of more like concepts that people have thought of about what the afterlife could be like. So one of them would be heaven, right, where we just go and live with God and all the other good people. We could only go there if we were very good people and we were selfless, we helped others, and we were there for each other. That's how we get to heaven. And then there's another possibility, hell, basically like the exact opposite, living selfishly in life and taking what we want for ourselves, doing what we want and not caring about the consequences, and hurting other people and finding that fun. Then there is a third, there's a third possibility. This one being reincarnation. Third possibility known as reincarnation. Now, reincarnation is kind of like the idea that you die and then your spirit goes out maybe for a little while, or maybe it's more instantaneous, but you just live again as either another human or another creature of some sort, another animal probably, and then the other two are kind of similar, I think. So let's talk about number 4 being limbo. Number 4 being limbo. So limbo would be like, for me, the way I think about limbo is it's just pretty much experiencing like nothing at all, like just a blank white screen and you're just in that, or possibly just a blank black screen, just pretty much like nothing to see, nothing to do. And I imagine you'd end up in limbo if you were very apathetic. And say hello to Drax. This is my little kitty. Yes. And the 5th one is purgatory. So the way I would describe purgatory is it would be pretty much staying where you are after you die. So basically being a ghost and haunting a place or something. And I imagine it's really only possible if in life you get very attached to the things that you know, like your possessions and whatnot, and you don't have very fulfilling, relationships with other human beings, and you just can't let go of what you had, kind of thing. So that's what I imagine purgatory is like. And yes, it's kind of hard not to believe in ghosts if you believe in spirits, because it's really the same thing. So I must admit I kind of do believe in ghosts. I don't really like the idea of being haunted and stuff, but I can't deny that spirits are, definitely a thing. I mean, they're, in my opinion, they're kind of the reason that human beings are able to live and have their own personalities and whatnot, as well as like little animals like this kitty. So it's just the way that it is. Yeah, so thanks for watching this episode. There will be another one out, in a few months. It's going to be a good one, hopefully. Yeah, it's actually going to be a really controversial one. But we'll see how it goes. And thanks for watching, like I said. Love you guys.